Imagine someone, like, secretly slips a toxin into your drink, steals absolutely every document that proves who you are, and then just leaves you for dead.
Which is an incredibly dark thought, yeah.
Right. But now, imagine that exact same person is the only reason you survived, and you consider them to be, like, your absolute savior. I mean, it sounds like a total contradiction.
It really does. It's totally paradoxical.
Yeah. But today, we are diving into the case files of a man who actually realized that the easiest way to trap someone wasn't with a weapon at all. It was with a favor.
Yeah. And it is honestly one of the most chilling psychological setups we have ever explored. You're talking about Charles Sobhraj, a man who essentially became one of the most prolific and, frankly, elusive serial killers of the 1970s. And he did it all while hiding behind this very charming, very sophisticated disguise of a gem dealer.
Exactly. And to really understand how he pulled this off, we've pulled a massive stack of sources for today's deep dive. We're looking at declassified diplomatic cables, some historical Interpol case files, and even deep dive psychological assessments of con artistry from that specific era.
Right, because the era is so important to how he operated.
Totally. So our mission today is to unpack not just the timeline of his crimes, because that's crazy enough, but the actual mechanics of his deception. Like, how does someone turn the ultimate tourist fantasy, insider help, local connections, these thrilling adventures, into a literal death trap?
Well, to answer that, I mean, we really have to look at the blueprint of a predator. And his blueprint was drafted in this very specific, very intense environment of rejection.
Okay, so where does his story actually start?
So he was born in Saigon in 1944. This was back when it was French Indochina. His mother was Vietnamese and his father was a Sindhi businessman. But the crucial part here is that his father entirely denied paternity.
Oh, wow. So right from birth, you have this profound denial of his identity.
Exactly. I mean, he's essentially stateless within his own family structure.
That has to mess with the kid.
Oh, absolutely. And it gets even more complicated because his mother later marries a French army lieutenant. So the family is constantly moving, right, between Southeast Asia and France. And in this new blended family, he is just completely sidelined.
Like the classic outsider.
Yeah, he was overshadowed by his younger half-siblings. And, when you're a child in an environment where you feel like you have absolutely no inherent status, you quickly learn that you have to, manufacture your own importance.
You learn to manipulate situations just to get basic attention, or even just to survive, really.
Right, precisely. And that manipulation, it metastasized into petty crime pretty fast. Because by 1963, he's just a teenager, and he's serving his first real prison sentence for burglary in France.
But wait, what did he actually do while he was inside that prison? Because usually, a teenager in a tough adult French prison would just put their head down or, just try to survive the sentence.
And that is exactly what makes his time there so revealing. He didn't just submit to the institution. He almost immediately started testing its structural weaknesses.
Testing the guards, basically.
Yeah. He realized that the prison guards were, at the end of the day, just people doing a job.
Yeah.
And people can be charmed. So he leverages this intense natural charisma to start negotiating special privileges. Like, for instance, he convinced the wardens to let him keep books in his cell.
Which I'm guessing was not exactly standard issue back then.
No, it was a very rare luxury.
It almost feels like a beta test. Like, how software developers release a small beta version of an app just to work out all the bugs before the grand launch?
Oh, that's a great analogy, yeah.
It's like that French prison was his beta test. He was figuring out that his charm was this tangible currency he could spend even when he was locked behind bars.
That is a perfect way to look at it, actually. And he even used that exact currency on a wealthy prison volunteer. He charmed this young man who came in to visit the inmates. And the second Sobhraj was paroled, that volunteer unwittingly became his golden ticket straight into Parisian high society.
Wow, so he just skips the transition and goes straight from a concrete cell to rubbing elbows with the Parisian elite?
Seamlessly. But he is living a complete double life because he's at these fancy high society dinners, but he's funding that entire lifestyle by running burglaries in the criminal underworld.
It's just the audacity for me. And during this period, he meets a young woman, right, from a very conservative family.
Yes, Chantal Compagnon.
Yeah.
And the timing of this is just staggering. He actually proposes to her on the exact same day he gets arrested for trying to outrun the Parisian police in a stolen car.
I mean, that is just wild. Will you marry me? Oh, wait, I gotta run from the cops.
Literally. But the craziest part is she waits for him. He does an 8-month stint, he gets out, they get married, and then we hit 1970.
Right, and things start getting hot for him in France.
Yeah, the French authorities are finally closing the net on his local burglary rings. So, with the police effectively suffocating his operation there, he realizes he has a geographical problem.
He needs a new ecosystem.
Exactly. He needs a jurisdiction with way fewer resources and way more blind spots. So they flee France, and they essentially run scams all across Eastern Europe until they finally land in Asia, right at the dawn of the mid-70s hippie trail.
Okay, let's set the stage for that era, because the sociology of the hippie trail is just vital to this whole story. You have thousands and thousands of young Western backpackers traveling overland through South Asia. But what was it about their mindset that made them so uniquely vulnerable to someone like him?
It was their active rebellion against Western structures.
Yeah.
I mean, these travelers were out there seeking enlightenment, right?
Right.
Escaping the rigid bureaucracy of their home countries.
So they didn't really want anything to do with authority.
No, not at all. They actively distrusted authority figures like the local police or even their own embassies. Instead, they relied on this radical, completely unguarded culture of trust with strangers.
Like, you shared food, you shared rides.
Yeah, and you implicitly trusted friendly locals.
Which, on one hand, is this beautiful, naive ecosystem. But whenever you have an ecosystem built entirely on unguarded trust, a predator is eventually going to figure out how to harvest it.
And harvest it, he did.
So that brings us to his primary method of funding his lifestyle in Asia. How exactly did he manufacture that intense loyalty?
He used this terrifying, almost medical con. He wouldn't just mug you in an alley. He would actually manufacture a crisis solely so he could be the one to solve it.
Oh, man.
Yeah, he would secretly slip a toxin into a traveler's food or their drink. And he specifically used laxatives or certain bacteria that perfectly mimic dysentery.
Which was probably the #1 fear of every Western backpacker in Asia at the time.
Precisely. So the victim thinks, oh no, I've caught the local water bug, completely unaware that they've actually been poisoned.
So they're just getting violently ill, and then boom, he swoops in.
Right on cue. Just as they're hitting rock bottom, Sobhraj miraculously appears. He's this charming, affluent gem dealer who speaks multiple languages. He offers them shelter, he pays for their medicine, and he literally nurses them back to health himself.
Wow. I mean, when someone saves your life in a foreign country, especially where you don't speak the language and you have zero safety net, you are basically indebted to them forever.
You're intensely loyal.
It's almost like Munchausen by proxy, but weaponized purely for financial profit.
That's a really accurate way to describe it. And it worked flawlessly for him. By doing this, he just hijacked human gratitude. He gathered this tight-knit clan of devoted followers around him.
Right, like the tourist from Quebec, Marie-Andre Leclerc, who was looking for adventure, and the local guy, Ajay Chowdhury, who basically became his second-in-command.
Yeah, they were entirely under his spell. But as we move into 1975 and 1976, covering Thailand, Nepal, and India, the grift starts to escalate.
It goes from fraud and theft to actual mass murder.
It does. It gets incredibly dark.
And I really want to dig into the why here.
Yeah.
Because we know of at least a dozen confirmed victims from this specific period. There was a young woman from Seattle found in a tidal pool, a Turkish traveler whose burned body was found near a resort, and that young Dutch couple who were poisoned, nursed, and eventually strangled and burned.
It's horrific.
It really is. So what is the psychological mechanism behind this jump? Like, is this a sadistic compulsion to kill, or is there a different motive driving him?
Well, that is actually the pivotal debate among the investigators and psychologists who study him. Now, he later claimed these were just accidental drug overdoses.
Right, convenient.
Very.
Mm.
But the evidence points away from pure sadism and points heavily toward this ruthless form of risk management.
Risk management.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As his spinning plates started to wobble, murder essentially became an administrative task for him.
Mm-hmm.
The people he killed were usually victims who had maybe spent too much time with him, who realized they were being scammed, or who actively threatened to expose his whole criminal syndicate.
So he just killed them to erase a liability.
Exactly. It was a brutal way to keep the operation running.
But he wasn't just erasing their physical presence. He was erasing their identities and absorbing them. The passport theft component is the part that I just find the most fascinating.
It's definitely one of his most infamous tactics.
Can you explain the actual mechanics of how identity theft worked on an international level back in the 1970s? Because today, With our technology, that just feels impossible.
Oh, you have to forget absolutely everything you know about modern travel. In the 1970s, passports didn't have biometric chips. They didn't have barcodes, no holographic security features.
No scanning at all, really.
Nothing. They were essentially just small, flimsy paper booklets. The photograph was often just glued or maybe lightly stamped inside the page.
Okay, so how did he actually alter them without getting flagged at border control?
Well, he was incredibly skilled at physical forgery. He would use steam from a kettle to carefully lift the lamination, dissolve the glue, and just remove the victim's photograph.
Just slide it right out.
Yeah. And then he'd slide in a photo of himself or maybe one of his accomplices and meticulously reseal it. And honestly, if you looked even vaguely similar to the original description on paper, that was usually enough.
Because the border guards were just glancing at a piece of paper.
Exactly. I mean, he literally traveled into Nepal using the forged passports of that murdered Dutch couple, and then he left Nepal using the passports of a Canadian and an American he murdered while he was there.
It's like this macabre relay race where the baton is a stolen identity.
That's exactly what it was.
But surely, I mean, leaving a trail of burned bodies and missing tourists across multiple countries would trigger massive alarm bells, right?
You would think so. It definitely would today. But if we connect his methods to the global infrastructure at that time, his whole strategy exploited a massive systemic blind spot.
Because the police forces were disjointed.
Extremely. You had these highly fragmented, deeply underfunded local police forces in these specific tourist regions. Plus, there was no internet, obviously, and no instantaneous cross-border communication between international agencies.
So it's like trying to catch water with a tennis racket. A police department in Thailand finds a body, but they have absolutely no mechanism to connect it to a missing persons report that gets filed in Canada 3 weeks later.
Exactly right. He was slipping through the cracks because, frankly, the cracks were the size of canyons.
Wow.
But ultimately, the sheer arrogance of his operation did catch up with him, just not through traditional law enforcement. It took an independent investigator who was entirely outside the police system.
Right, the Dutch diplomat, Herman Knippenberg.
Yes. Knippenberg was stationed in Thailand, and he and his wife, Angela Kane, started looking into the disappearance of those 2 Dutch students.
Because the local police weren't getting anywhere.
Right. And he wasn't a homicide detective, but he was a meticulous bureaucrat. He really knew how to organize information. So he started recognizing a pattern that the disjointed police forces were completely missing.
And he actually gets into Sobhraj's apartment, doesn't he?
He does. With the help of some of Sobhraj's incredibly brave neighbors, Knippenberg managed to get inside the apartment after the killer had fled the country. And he built this massive, undeniable dossier of evidence.
Like what kind of evidence?
He found victims' documents, the altered passports, the specific poisons he was using, and all the syringes.
Which is just a phenomenal piece of investigative work for a diplomat.
Truly unprecedented.
But the funny thing is, despite Knippenberg really tightening the net, Sobhraj's actual downfall in July 1976 was entirely his own doing. And honestly, it was unbelievably sloppy.
It really, really was.
I mean, he's in New Delhi, India, and he tries to pull his standard poisoning scam on an entire tour group of French postgraduate students all at once.
Yeah, which is just a huge logistical nightmare.
Right. So he poses as a tour guide, hands out what he claims is anti-dysentery medicine, but he completely miscalculates the dosage. The drugs work way too fast.
And chaos ensues.
Exactly. Dozens of people start dropping unconscious right there in the lobby of the hotel. 3 of the students realize what's happening. They physically overpower him. The police are called, and he is finally captured and sent to Tihar jail.
It was a spectacular failure.
It really was. And honestly, I have to introduce some friction here, because you see Sobhraj described in the media constantly as this evil genius, but drugging 60 people simultaneously in a crowded hotel lobby, that's not the work of a genius. That is reckless, desperate, and incredibly foolish.
I see your point. And yeah, applying the word genius to his crimes on the outside does give him far too much credit. He was mostly just a ruthless opportunist. But if I can push back on that slightly.
Yeah, please do.
His true genius, and I use that term strictly in a manipulative dark sense, was not in evading capture on the outside. His genius was his uncanny ability to exploit and corrupt institutional systems from the inside once he was actually caught.
Okay, let's explore that, because his 12-year stint in Tihar jail, just defies all logic. I mean, Tihar is notorious. It is not a luxury facility by any stretch of the imagination.
Not at all. It's incredibly harsh.
So how does someone walk into a maximum security prison in India and almost immediately start living like a king?
It comes down to his deep understanding of human leverage and institutional corruption. You see, before he was fully processed into the jail, he had precious gems concealed internally within his body.
Wait, so he literally smuggled in his own bank account?
Precisely. Once inside, he retrieved them, which gave him immediate, untraceable capital.
That's crazy.
But it wasn't just about handing out crude bribes. It was about psychology. He didn't just pay the guards. He befriended them. He solved problems for the prison officials. He created this shadow economy where he actually controlled the flow of goods inside the prison.
And became indispensable to them.
Exactly. And because of this, he was granted a television in his cell, he ate gourmet food, and he essentially held court. He would grant interviews to Western journalists who were just fascinated by his myth. He basically became a shadow warden.
Which is mind-blowing. And this incredible internal control builds all the way up to 1986, which brings us to perhaps the most twisted legal masterstroke of his entire life.
Oh, this part is just unbelievable.
So he's in his 10th year in Tihar jail. His sentence is finally coming to an end. But he has a massive, highly lethal problem waiting for him at the finish line, right?
The very lethal problem.
Yeah.
The Thai authorities still had an active warrant for his extradition for all those murders committed there in the mid-70s. And in Thailand, he was facing an almost certain execution.
Okay, but crucially, Thai law had a 20-year statute of limitations on those murder charges.
Yeah, that's the key detail.
So let me just get this straight. He knows that if he just serves his time like a normal inmate and walks out of that Indian prison on his scheduled release date, he is getting put on a one-way flight to a firing squad in Thailand.
Without a doubt.
So he actually needs to stay in the Indian prison to survive. But how do you legally force a country to keep you locked up when your time is served?
You commit another highly publicized crime. So he throws this massive party for his guards and his fellow inmates inside the prison.
A party in a maximum security jail.
Yes.
Yeah.
And he drugs them all with sleeping pills, basically returning to his classic try-and-true methodology, and he simply walks out the front gates.
Just strolls out.
Yep. But the absolute key to this is that he doesn't actually try to disappear.
Right. He goes to Goa, which is this massive tourist hub in India, and basically just waits around until he gets recognized.
He literally allows himself to be caught at a restaurant.
It is brilliant in the absolute darkest way possible. The legal math works out perfectly for him. The Indian authorities are totally embarrassed by this high-profile escape, so they slap an additional 10 years onto his sentence as punishment.
Which is exactly what he wanted.
He weaponized the justice system against itself to save his own life. So he sits out those extra 10 years, and by the time he is finally released in 1997, that 20-year Thai statute of limitations has officially expired.
The warrants are totally voided. The witnesses have moved on.
He is legally a free man. The Indian authorities have absolutely no choice but to put him on a plane back to France, where he just retires comfortably to the Parisian suburbs.
And logically speaking, this is where the story should end. I mean, he beat the international justice system. He was living in France, charging exorbitant amounts of money for media interviews, just basking in his infamy.
He won.
Right. All he had to do was quietly fade into obscurity and enjoy his freedom.
But if we've learned anything about his psychology today, his ego was a much bigger liability than any police force ever was. It's like an aging rock star who just can't resist playing one last gig, even when they know the venue is a total trap.
That's a very apt comparison.
Because in 2003, Charles Sobhraj makes the totally baffling decision to return to Kathmandu, Nepal.
It completely defies all logic, because Nepal was one of the very few places on Earth where there was still an active, unresolved murder case against him that had not expired.
So why on earth would he voluntarily fly back into the jaws of literally the only trap left?
It really reveals the ultimate fatal flaw of the narcissist.
Yeah.
He suffered from this pathological overconfidence in his own intellect. He truly believed he was simply smarter than the authorities in Nepal.
He thought he was untouchable.
Yeah. I mean, some sources suggest he went there to set up a legitimate mineral water business, but the underlying psychological reality is that he just missed the game. He missed the thrill of being the snake in the grass, operating right under the nose of danger, manipulating people who didn't realize who they were dealing with.
But the grass had changed. He wasn't dealing with the fragmented analog world of the 1970s anymore.
Not at all.
A local journalist actually spots him gambling in a Kathmandu casino. The journalist recognizes him, follows him, takes pictures, and publishes a huge expose, and the police see the article, raid the casino, and arrest him.
The modern world caught up with him.
It did. And the poetic justice of his conviction is just incredible to me. What was the mechanism that finally put him away for good?
It was the meticulous paperwork of Herman Knippenberg.
Yes.
Those old photocopies, the files built by the Dutch diplomat nearly 3 decades earlier in 1976, they were brought out, dusted off, and used as the primary evidence to sentence Sobhraj to life in prison for the 1975 murder of an American tourist.
It's amazing. The bureaucrat finally beats the con artist with a paper trail.
Exactly. And then 10 years later, in 2014, they actually convict him of a second murder from that exact same era.
So he spends almost 2 more decades languishing in a Nepalese prison. His health rapidly declines. He ends up requiring open-heart surgery. And finally, in December of 2022, the Supreme Court of Nepal orders his release.
But not because he was exonerated.
No, and certainly not because he outsmarted the system this time. They released him strictly due to his advanced age and his failing health. He was deported back to France and effectively banned from ever returning.
It really brings his entire life narrative full circle in a rather pathetic way. I mean, the man who spent his absolute prime manipulating global borders, outsmarting extradition treaties, and slipping through the fingers of every major law enforcement agency on the planet, he ultimately handed himself over in his twilight years simply because he couldn't bear the thought of being ignored.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, let's distill what we've actually just explored. We've looked at a man who navigated the globe using the stolen identities of his victims, who corrupted heavily guarded justice systems from the inside out, and who left this terrible trail of devastation across 2 continents.
Yeah.
But the scariest part is that he didn't do it with brute force. He did it by weaponizing human empathy.
And that is exactly why this history matters to you, the person listening right now. His life serves as this very dark, cautionary masterclass in the psychology of trust. As a species, we are hardwired to seek connection.
We want to trust people.
We do. When we are out of our element, like traveling in a foreign country, we naturally accept help. We want to trust people who present themselves as friendly locals or confident authorities. Predators understand that our innate desire for genuine connection is often our biggest structural vulnerability.
Which leaves me with a lingering, modern question that I want you to mull over today. Back in the 1970s, this entire operation relied on steaming a photo off a flimsy paper passport, a complete lack of communication between international police departments, and travelers routinely just dropping off the grid for months at a time.
Which is totally normal then.
Right. But today, you can't even walk through an airport without passing a biometric scanner. We leave massive digital footprints everywhere we go, and our locations are broadcast in real time on social media.
The structural blind spots he exploited just don't exist in the same way anymore.
Exactly. So the question is, could a predator like this operate today? Has modern biometric technology made the physical, border-hopping serial con artist totally extinct? Or, and this is the scary part, have the mechanisms of manipulation simply evolved?
That's the real worry.
Right. Are today's predators just hiding behind digital screens using deepfakes and hacked profiles, making them even harder to track than a man with a stolen paper passport? Keep your eyes open out there.
A fascinating question to leave us with.
We'll see you next time.